Military repel ISWAP attack on Askira Uba local government area of Borno State as army officer and 3 soldiers are killed in the encounter. No end in sight in the leadership crisis in Plateau State House of Assembly as hoodlums once again invade complex, damaging vital items. The National Drug Law Enforcement Agency arrests 12 dock workers at the Apapa seaport over the importation of 32.9 kilograms of cocaine worth over 9.5 billion naira. And at least 68 prisoners are killed in fresh fighting that broke out Friday evening at an Ecuadorian prison.
And on business news tonight, stock market gains more than 640 billion naira in 2 days this week, despite intense sell pressure and drop in volume of shares turnover.
As troops of Operation Hadinkai have repelled an attack by ISWAP terrorists on Askira Uba in Borno State. This is contained in a statement by the Director, Army Public Relations, Brigadier General Onyema Nwachukwu, explaining that the troops, supported by the air component of the operation, destroyed several equipment belonging to the insurgents, including 2 Dragon combat vehicles and 9 gun trucks. He states that, unfortunately, an officer, Brigadier General Zama Zikisu, and 3 soldiers were killed in the gun battle, which the army describes as a fierce encounter. It was gathered that after the ISWAP fighters invaded Askira town, troops of 28 Task Force Brigade Chibok were mobilized to the area to engage the terrorists. Brigadier General Zikisu and his team were said to have been ambushed in a place known as Buguma, a few kilometers from Askira town. Askira Uba local government, which shares border with Chibok of the famed schoolgirls abduction, has been repeatedly attacked in recent times, but today's attack is said to be the fiercest. Meanwhile, the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Farouk Yahaya, has commiserated with the families of the fallen heroes and directed the troops to pursue the remnant of the fleeing insurgents with a view to eliminating them. Following that encounter, the governor of Borno State, Babagana Zulum, has commended the Nigerian military for putting a strong position in the battle today. In a statement, Governor Zulum paid tribute to the troops at the military base, as well as troops from neighboring commands who mobilized to provide reinforcement before they were ambushed. While commiserating with the military over the loss of some military officers and personnel, the governor thanked the fallen heroes for what he called their supreme sacrifices to the Nigerian nation, declaring that the people of Borno will remain forever grateful to them and support the gallant troops currently operating in the front lines. He also commiserated with the affected residents for the trauma caused by the attack. And in the face of the prevailing insecurity in the country, the Chief of Defense Intelligence says the agency has begun to reappraise its strategies to meet up with the current security threats. Major General Samuel Adebayo says that reevaluation will boost the agency's intelligence gathering capability in tackling insecurity. He was speaking at the opening of a retreat for officers in the nation's capital, Abuja.
Considering the extant security challenges in the country, the need to put together a self-examination mechanism in line with global best practices to ensure optimal performance evaluation has become necessary. This retreat will undoubtedly serve as an avenue to identify new lessons and challenges, discuss modalities of overcoming such challenges, and re-strategize for the future. Accordingly, the topic, Contemporary Threat Assessment and National Development, the need for a continuous reappraisal of our strategies, operational tactics, and methods of intelligence gathering in order to efficiently deal with our security challenges is therefore highly paramount. This forum will no doubt provide the opportunity to tap from the vast experiences of the former Chiefs of Defense Intelligence and past directors of the agency, as well as those of us here who have ideas on who understand the mandate of the Defense Intelligence Agency and an idea of how it should be achieved.
In Zamfara State, at least 9 people have been reported killed after armed men suspected to be bandits attacked Tugunruwa village in Anka local government area. The gunmen were said to have also rustled livestock, boggled shops, stole foodstuff and other valuables. Sources in the community told Channels Television that the gunmen invaded the town on Wednesday night and started shooting sporadically, leading to the death of 9 locals with several others injured. The spokesperson of the State Police Command, Superintendent Mohammed Shehu, confirmed the incident, explaining that the command has deployed tactical operatives to go after the perpetrators. From Zamfara, let's move to Kogi State, where the governor, Yahaya Bello, says the root cause of the current security challenges in the country is political. Governor Bello, who was speaking at a meeting in the nation's capital, Abuja, said Nigerians must come together to tackle the challenges, especially as it relates to the political issues.
Let me tell you, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that more than 90%, and I make bold to say this, more than 90% of the insecurity we are witnessing today in Nigeria is largely political. Be it Boko Haram, be it banditry, be it even farmers-herders clash, even sometimes assassinations, kidnapping. More than 90% is political. And when you take care of the political insecurity, the remaining 10% takes care of itself. My dear brothers, let us appreciate the enormity of the challenge that Mr. President is facing. I equally faced all of these challenges when I assumed office.
The crisis rocking the Plateau State House of Assembly appears to be far from over, as more destruction has been unleashed at the Assembly complex by hoodlums. Now, the latest incident affected legislative proceedings on Friday, as 12 members of the House, under the leadership of Honorable Yakubu Sanda, held a plenary session in the chambers. Their sitting comes in spite of the order by the Inspector General of Police directing the closure of the complex due to the lingering crisis amongst the lawmakers, which resulted in the removal of the Speaker of the House, Ayuba Abok.
This is a sign that greets a first-time visitor to the Plateau State House of Assembly in Jos, the state capital. But these images inside the main complex paint a picture of a place in turmoil. Various items such as air conditioners, furniture, glass panes, among others, have been destroyed by yet-to-be-identified persons, even as the place is still under seal. One after the other, lawmakers make their way into the complex to pick up pieces of what's left in preparation for plenary. With assessment of the destruction over, they proceed to plenary but fail to deliberate on the 2022 appropriation bill, as well as the request from the state governor, Simon Lalong, concerning appointments into the State Independent Electoral Commission.
For an exercise as important as the screening, in order not to put the House in bad light, and therefore I carefully indulgent of my colleagues with the kind permission of Mr. Speaker, that we stand down the screening and confirmation, because you already mentioned we can as well do it either at the executive session on Monday, or we can have an extraordinary sitting which is guaranteed by the Constitution to be able to do that. I so move, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Any supporter?
My name is Surveyor Right Honorable Saleh Shehu Yidmon, member representing the good people in Dengi State Constituency. Mr. Speaker, I'm from Kanambaka government. In view of the motion that the Honorable Majority Leader has spoken about, I rise to second the motion. I so second, Mr. Speaker.
The resolve to move legislative business to the old government house.
Obviously, we're all eyewitnesses to what has happened here. And in a normal situation, the place is not conducive enough for legislative business. And of course, we have to invite His Excellency, the Executive Governor of Plateau State, for obvious reasons. You heard what the majority leader said. Our capital project is no longer there. And therefore, for obvious reasons, because our capital is no longer there, we have to sort for alternative.
Outside the chamber, a member representing Jos South constituency, Watson Form, who is part of other 12 members opposed to the impeachment of the former speaker, describes the exercise as unconstitutional.
If 16 members had signed document for the impeachment of Abok, why did they have to come to the house 6 a.m. in the morning to do an illegality? The house rule says we should come to the house by 9 for our executive sessions. We start our plenary by 10. And then you have 16 people out of 24, that's 230, yes. But if you have those numbers, and let me tell you, the deputy speakers with them, you have a presiding officer, and you know that very day there were so many policemen that they have brought. If you have that capacity and you have the numbers, why didn't they do the right thing?
As the crisis continues to linger, analysts say there's need for the lawmakers to come together and settle their differences so the legislative business can continue in the interest of the people.
The National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLA, says it has in its custody 12 dock workers at the Apapa Seaport in Lagos over their alleged links to the importation of 32.9 kilograms of cocaine, worth over 9.5 billion naira in street value. A federal high court in Lagos had granted an application by the agency for the interim attachment of a vessel used to import the cocaine into Nigeria through the Apapa Seaport. The court also granted NDLE's request to detain the master of the ship, that's Mr. Tanahan Clerk, and 21 foreign crew members, as well as the dock workers arrested in connection to the case. On October the 13th, operatives of the agency had intercepted the ship following intelligence from international partners and support from the Nigerian Navy, Customs, DSS, and the police. After a thorough investigation and search of the ship by the NDLE operatives, 30 parcels containing the substance were recovered. In part two, after the break, Anglican primate speaks on drug consumption, especially amongst the youths. Plus, the president leaves Paris for South Africa to join other African leaders at the official opening of the second Intra-African trade fair taking place in Durban next week. That's in a moment. Stay with us. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Troops repel ISWAP attack on Askira Oba local government area of Borno State as army officer and 3 soldiers are killed in the encounter. No end in sight in the leadership crisis in the Plateau State House of Assembly as hoodlums once again invade complex, damaging vital items. The National Drug Law Enforcement Agency arrests 12 dock workers at the Apapa Seaport over the importation of 32.9 kilograms of cocaine, worth over 9.5 billion naira. And at least 68 prisoners are killed in fresh fighting that broke out Friday evening at an Ecuadorian prison. As concerns over dangers of drug abuse mount, the primate of the Church of Nigeria, Anglican Communion, Archbishop Henry Ndukuba, is expressing worry over its impacts on youths in the country. In tackling the menace, the cleric believes the church has a duty to enlighten the public about it, especially as it affects young people. Speaking to journalists after addressing the Conference of Anglican Bishops in Abuja, Archbishop Ndukuba says drug addiction amongst young people is responsible for the current security situation in the country.
Around this city, you may see or know of spots where drugs are openly peddled, sold, And they are patronized by all and sundry. No, in fact, it cuts across classes. And it does not matter where, even in the rural areas, drugs are also having a field day, dehumanizing our people. And as you may see, the primary school children, the street young men, the women, in one of our northern states, even married women in their closet are also addicted to drugs.
To other stories now, the president is expected in Durban, South Africa today after leaving Paris to join other African leaders at the official opening ceremony of the second Intra-African Trade Fair 2021. The event, holding from November the 15th to the 21st, is being convened by the African Export-Import Bank in collaboration with the African Union Commission and the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat. The fair aims to boost trade and investment across the continent, brainstorm on strategies to implement new ideas, and provide a platform to fulfill solutions to the challenges of intra-African trade. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari will be accompanied on the trip by a delegation, including the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Jeffrey Onyama, Industry, Trade and Investment, Mr. Ni Adebayo. The President is expected in Nigeria on Tuesday, November the 16th. Poor sanitation and hygiene practices have been blamed for the cholera epidemic taking its toll on some states across the country. So far, over 3,000 children, mostly between the ages of 5 and 14, are reported to have died from a disease that has killed more Nigerians in about a year than the coronavirus pandemic since its index case in 2020. In this next report, our correspondent, Millicent Walker, looks at how cholera has ravaged communities this year.
This is Aliu Musa, even though it might not show. But he's a man going through a lot of pain as he narrates how he lost his 5-year-old son and almost an entire family to cholera.
My wife and children were attending a wedding, and suddenly one of my daughters started vomiting. I rushed to pick them up, and moments after returning home, my son, the eldest daughter, and my wife started vomiting too. My daughter, who first presented the symptoms, recovered almost immediately, but my son died hours later.
As reports show, cholera is holding sway in 32 states and the FCT, with 10 northern states considered as active. Provision of safe water for consumption remains critical to preventing and controlling the transmission of cholera and other waterborne diseases. The disease is identified by profuse watery diarrhea, vomiting, thirst, leg cramps, restlessness or irritability and other symptoms. Researchers estimate that every year there are 1.3 to 4 million cases of cholera and 21,000 to 143,000 deaths worldwide due to the infection. In Nigeria, the number of countrywide case fatality rate has increased to 3.5%, following over 3,200 deaths as of October 2021 from almost 100,000 suspected cases.
The issue of cholera on the plateau started on the 30th of April 2021. Immediately after the fasting period, we started noticing some cases of cholera. We thought it was as a result of eating too much after the fasting, but it continues, and the thing continued to spread. So it started in Jos North and spread to other local governments. So the highest burden has been Jos North and Jos South.
We have discovered that since the first outbreak of cholera was reported in the 60s, cholera has now become a common occurrence in Nigeria. So it's a disease that lives with us, if we can put it that way. So we always have cases of cholera. However, we can also say that cholera is an epidemic because there are different times of the year where we have an increase a large increase in the number of cases.
Even though the disease caused by the vibrobacteria is often predictable and preventable, why has it persisted, especially in the northern region of the country?
There is no political will to actually bring an end to this disease in our region. Two cardinal points are important in trying to address cholera, and these are actually provision of potable drinking water and of course environmental sanitation and personal hygiene.
If according to an estimation by the World Health Organization that officially reported cases represent 5 to 10% of the actual cases, then what is the response activities of the Nigeria Center for Disease Control and local public health leaders?
You know, having jingles that are produced here at NCDC, and then we go to state and they domesticate. Probably, you know, they translate in their local languages. You know, we were in one state, they translate into about 3-4 languages, and we were able to pay advocacy to media houses, and then they gave us free airtime. So I think it's an issue of engagement. You know, we need the state to really engage with their partners.
While rapid access to treatment is essential during a cholera outbreak, the disease remains a global threat to public health and an indicator of inequality and a lack of social development. Continuous advocacy on the importance of access to clean water and sanitation facilities, good hygiene practices need to be ensured and sustained for the whole population. Millicent Walker, Channels Television News.
Nigeria's population of over 200 million is impacting on the nation's infrastructure, and this pressure is most felt in the housing sector, as most residents strive to own their own homes. Faced with this challenge, the federal government is coming up with several policies to address the housing needs of Nigerians, although the figure of the housing deficit remains in dispute. Our next report takes a look at the challenges in the effort to bridge the housing gap in the country.
Nigeria's population is ever increasing, and according to the National Bureau of Statistics, the country's population has continued to grow by over 2% in the last 5 years, reaching an estimated 213 million people as the population growth rate hits 2.58% in 2020. This population explosion also comes with its own challenges, including the lack of access to decent accommodation by some of the citizens. While some independent sources have pegged Nigeria's housing deficit at an estimate 17 to 20 million, the federal government debunks the figure, insisting there is no basis for such a conclusion.
Those numbers that have been bandied around, we have 17 million deficit, is a lie. I found the source of it. It was in a document in our ministry that it was written, and I've asked the author, and they said there was no verification, there was no basis, there was no data to support it.
Notwithstanding the government's position on the statistics about the housing deficit, one thing remains clear, that housing shortages exist in the country, and many citizens do not have access to decent housing. This also explains why many states and the federal government continue to invest in mass housing projects each year. For example, the federal government's Family Homes Fund, National Housing Fund, and the National Cooperative Housing Development Scheme are some of the interventions of the government to address the country's housing needs. However, costs and stringent repayment plans are barriers for low-income earners to access some of these mortgages.
The best thing that I feel is possible is a flexible payment plan, because if you have a flexible payment plan whereby you can spread your payments and be able to pay for a longer period, that will make everybody to have a home of themselves.
So if you ask people to pay for a house by just dipping their hand into their pocket and bringing out their credit card, it won't match. One of the problems that I would like to see resolved is the payment system.
Recently, the federal government announced plans to float a national housing bond, a decision many say will help to address the challenge of affordability.
I think that currently only the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria gives a single-digit interest rates in terms of mortgages and construction finance. But with the capital market that we are going to raise, hopefully it's going to be on single digit too, or it's going to be cheaper than the commercial rates, and that will make it much cheaper, and it will be affordable to even the low and middle income earners.
Cost of land, cost of construction, cost of infrastructure, part of why it is difficult to, why it's expensive to see houses at lesser prices. With this national housing bond, we will be able to access funds at a lower rate and at a more fixed rate.
Access to adequate and affordable housing is part of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 11. To effectively deliver on this, the federal government will need a plan that is driven by accurate data, as well as a commitment to deliver affordable houses for those who truly need them.
From infrastructure, let's talk agriculture now. In Kano State, the government says that over 16,000 residents have benefited from the state's agricultural empowerment initiative. The multiple interventions worth millions of naira under the agro-pastoral development project targets beneficiaries from all 44 local government areas in the state. Our correspondent, Nanchin Vincent, has the rest of the story.
Dr. Junaidu Yakubu Mohammed will formally welcome everybody.
And other members of the State Executive Council that are here
will be executed through
the state project coordinators, notably K.
They have been provided with fertilizer, they've been provided with improved seeds, they've been provided with various equipment for mechanization in order to ensure that they practice commercial agriculture.
The governor says his administration is also providing an enabling environment for not just farming and harvesting products, but also processing, as this has made Kano the highest producers of rice in the country.
We have provided an enabling environment for the processing. We provide cheap land and sometimes even free land for whoever would like to establish a rice processing mill.
Intervention include 1,000 small-scale commercial fodder producers, livestock fattening and reproduction scheme for 3,000 people, provision of input for 5,350 smallholder commercial farmers. The deputy governor urges the beneficiaries to put in more efforts to ensure that the state is food sufficient.
All the beneficiaries, as His Excellency has always stressed to us, will be sure to make maximum use and benefit of what they receive, so that they can also train and be able to make Kano State food sufficient and reliant, and also Nigeria as a whole.
440 sprayers received entrepreneurship support, while 115 persons were awarded of scholarships to study agriculture-related courses at different levels. From Kano Commercial City, Nanchin Vincent, Channels Television News.
Now let's find out what's happening in the world of business. Laddie Williams has all the details.
Thanks, Melinda. Well, the domestic stock market has gained more than 646.3 billion naira this week, despite recording some amount of profit taken in 3 out of the 5 trading sessions. At the same time, the all-share index remains in the 43,000 level as it rose by almost 3% this week, while total value of listed equities remains in the 22 trillion mark, which was propelled into by listed telecom giants MTN Nigeria and Airtel Africa. However, sectoral performance across the 5 key counters of listed equities were mostly negative, particularly insurance and the banking sectors, while the consumer goods sector was the lone gainer with a 0.63% advance. Now to the FMDQ exchange. The total turnover of transactions carried out at the FX spot, forward and futures markets fell by 11.91% week on week to $750.79 million as of November the 12th. However, a breakdown of FX trading at the FMDQ exchange further shows that total value of transactions at the FX spot market jumped by 24.76% against the previous week to $544.82 million. Meanwhile, the Naira was unchanged in the comparative week at 413 Naira 64 kobo against the dollar at the Nigerian Autonomous Foreign Exchange window of the Forex market. And in its bid to alleviate the sufferings of retirees on federal government's payroll, the Pension Transitional Arrangement Directorate, PTAD, introduces an online pensioners verification process. At a two-day stakeholders engagement forum in Kano State, PTAD's personnel explained and demonstrated the workings of a digital pensioner verification portal, otherwise referred to as the I Am Alive pensioner confirmation process. Our correspondent, Abubakar Saliu, attended the forum and filed this report.
Gathered in this hall are pensioners drawn from various parts of Nigeria, engaging with the personnel of Pension Transitional Arrangement Directorate PTAD on the newly introduced Digital Retirees Verification System. On day one of the Stakeholders Engagement Forum, Executive Secretary of PTAD gives a rundown of PTAD's achievements in Nigeria's pension administration since she assumed office in August 2019.
In 2020, I also approved the commencement of an expanded revalidation and recomputation exercise in a bid to onboard verified pensioners not on payroll, clear all outstanding pension arrears, and resolve all complaints of short payments and outstanding gratuities for the civil service pensioners and their next of kin.
Pensioner confirmation followed by account number.
On the second day, presentation centered on the digital pensioner verification system, its workings and benefits derivable from it.
The ES described it as a web-based solution, and that just simply means that you can use a phone or a computer to do your I Am Alive confirmation, and you can do it anywhere you are.
Some of the pensioners applauded the new innovation while expressing skepticism about availability of internet connectivity in remote areas of Nigeria.
This new arrangement, as introduced by PTAD, is quite commendable, and we pensioners will appreciate it because it's going to alleviate the problems being faced by pensioners.
However, in her interaction with journalists at the end of the Stakeholders Engagement Forum, PTAD's Executive Secretary allays the fears of pensioners about internet connectivity.
I'm sure that if you travel 1 mile away from that area, or maybe 2 miles away from that area, there will be internet access. That's still better than traveling from Jigawa to Kano to come for a verification exercise. And it's something that would happen probably once in 3 months. So the pensioner would be able to conveniently use that period to get verified.
The forum ended with participants hoping that the new innovation will eliminate pensioners' stress of field verification as well as end the issue of ghost retirees.
And the Sokoto State government, in collaboration with the Nigerian Export Promotion Council, has disclosed its readiness to maximize the advantages of onions and cowpea through exportation. This was disclosed by the head of Sokoto office of the NEPC, Mr. Ahmed Yahaya, during a training organized by the Agency for Onion Farmers and Processors on modern ways of production, packaging, and other strategies to enhance commodity exports. Mr. Yahaya reiterates the Council's commitment during the workshop on the implementation of the One State, One Product Value Export Development Model in Sokoto State. And that's business news. It's back to you, Melinda.
Many thanks, Ladi. Outside our shores, talks at the Climate Summit in Glasgow are on the home stretch as countries continue to battle for a deal. President of COP26 Climate Summit called it a moment of truth for the planet Earth and urged delegates to agree to a draft agreement that many hope will help avert dangerous global warming. Africa and island states are making a case for full financial backing on loss and damage. Our environment correspondent, Ayola Kazim, has this report.
It's crunch time, so emotions are high.
How comes you're filming the police?
The number of police officers outside the conference center is higher than usual. Inside, members of civil society organizations stage a protest expressing their frustration with the process. Early in the morning, the COP presidency released a new text many see as deeply flawed as far as reining in emissions from fossil fuels is concerned.
This new proposal would give polluters the right to scam by allowing indefinite double counting of an emission reduction that has only happened once. Again, indefinite double counting for an emission reduction that has only happened once or may not have happened at all. And so this invitation to greenwash through the carbon offsetting of just making a farce of the Paris Agreement.
My friends, I open the floor.
And during the first plenary of the day, reactions to the second text is as varied as interests. The new draft agreement presses countries to be more ambitious in their plans to tackle global warming, while walking the fine line between the demands of developing countries and richer nations.
This is no brainer. We all know that in the room. Nobody disagrees in the room. The question is how we're going to do that. On what grounds we're going to do that. What is the system that is going to govern our pursuit to keep it alive and keep it within reach? Where is equity? Where is CBDR? Where is finance? Where is technology? Where is capacity building? All of that is not really at equal footing when we talk about the ambition, Your Excellency.
Members of the African group are a bit disappointed that the special needs of the continent have been dismissed in the test.
What we see now, and it's reflected in your latest cover decision, is support for technical purposes. What we have in mind here is not giving money to consultants to fly around the globe to come and educate us, teach us about what loss and damage is, and prescribe to us a theoretical decisions. What we're talking about is a dedicated facility.
After being relatively quiet within the last 2 weeks, the European Union representative says the decision in Glasgow should send a clear signal by halting fossil fuel subsidies and finally turn the page on coal.
And this is what we need to address today. We need to make sure major emitters reduce their emissions so that we keep 1.5 alive. That needs to be at the heart of our conclusions today. We need to be able to say when we meet again in Egypt next year, we've done it, we're on the track for 1.5. That's what we need to do between now and next year.
Negotiators are working around the clock to try to clinch a deal that almost 200 countries can agree to. Even when the parties reach an agreement, real work will begin once delegates return home, when they will need to ensure any measure signed off in Glasgow are upheld. Ayola Kazim, Channels Television News.
In the UAE, materials on climate change tops the charts as the most expensive as the 40th edition of the Sharjah International Book Fair, priced £1.65 million, and that's over 800 million naira. With over 800 works, it was first presented at the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26. Our correspondent, Halima Gayam, has the rest of the story.
Pictures of the replica of 4 of the 7 wonders of the world of books rest on the wall at the 40th Sharjah International Book Fair. The world's most expensive book, Codes Leicester by Leonardo da Vinci, the most important scientific book in mankind's history, De Revolutionibus, most important European book about the Arabic culture written 2 centuries ago, and the most mysterious, Being placed at one place for the first time and being part of the many literary rarities here doesn't make them stand out. The light of the shelf beams on it as it lies, awaiting £1.6 million, over 800 million in Naira, for its worthiness to be explored. It's an assemblage of first edition works, signed copies, original bindings, and iconic visual materials from renowned scientists, with some from Eunice Newton-Foote on the heating effect of carbon dioxide. It makes the most expensive at the fair this year, with over 500 years of knowledge enclosed in it. Is it too pricey for a book whose need is now, when climate change feels more real than ever?
Not necessarily. It's about finding the kind of institution that wants to take in such a special, a specialised collection, and whether they have if they want to become sort of a centre of excellence for climate change.
In the two antiquarian stores, more rare books are behind the glasses. 3 unpublished notebooks of a naval midshipman, Francis Larkin, concerning Sharjah for £125,000. Karl Marx's Le Capital, Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, Shakespeare's Comedy of Play. But none of them takes the shine of this collection in price nor momentousness, not even when everything you need to ace science is in one big fat book. Discoveries as far as 1485 on the journey to climate change spread on the pages of these may come in handy at this time when discussions on the way forward is overtaking the stage. From the Sharjah International Book Fair at the Emirate of Sharjah, the United Arab Emirates, Halima Gayam, Channels Television News.
Chris Ellems gives us the latest from the world of sports.
Welcome to Sports News. The Super Eagles of Nigeria are on the verge of qualifying for the final phase of the Qatar 2022 World Cup qualifier after a 2-0 win over the Lone Star of Liberia in Tangier, Morocco. The Eagles scored the 2 goals from the penalty spot, with Victor Osimhen converting the first 15 minutes into the game after Kelechi Iheanacho was fouled, while Captain Ahmed Musa scored the second goal. Nigeria will now need a point to qualify when they face Cape Verde on Tuesday in Lagos in the final Group C match. The Eagles currently top the group with 12 points, while Cape Verde, who beat Central African Republic 2-1, occupy the second place with 10 points. That'll be all on sports. Back to you, Melinda.
Many thanks, Chris. We'll begin the international stories by bringing you an update on the Climate Change Summit in Glasgow. A deal has finally been reached at COP26 after nearly 2 weeks of negotiations. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson says it's a big step forward, but he insists that there's a huge amount of work that still needs to be done. India and China asked for a crucial last-minute change to the agreement, calling for the phase-down, not the phase-out, of coal power. It was approved, but many countries say they were still deeply disappointed. The deal is receiving mixed reaction. Greenpeace says it keeps the 1.5C goal only just alive. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says it's an important step, but more still needs to be done. The summit's overall goal was to chart a path to keep global warming limited and avoid the worst impact of climate change. Officials in Ecuador say at least 68 prisoners have been killed in new fightings at an Ecuadorian prison, with more than 100 inmates dead in clashes between rival gangs in September. The riot at the Litoral Penitentiary in the city of Guayaquil reportedly began on Friday evening. Reports say police tactical units who have entered prison buildings have found guns and explosives. Nearly 300 inmates have died so far this year in the country's prisons. September's gang-related violence is said to be the worst in Ecuador's history. Tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, and other cities to protest against a military takeover, despite security forces firing tear gas and bullets to disperse them. As protesters began to gather in the early afternoon around the capital, eyewitnesses say security forces moved quickly to try and disperse them, firing tear gas and chasing demonstrators. One death was reported, but the Central Committee of Sudanese doctors say 2 protesters were killed during the demonstrations against military rule. The demonstrations come 2 days after the military leader, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, announced the formation of a new ruling council that excludes the civilian coalition. The military had been sharing power since 2019. The head of the World Health Organization has painted a gloomy picture of life in Tigray region in the north of Ethiopia, a year into a civil war. Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, who is a Tigrayan himself, says that the region is under an effective barricade. He says there's no medicine and people are dying of starvation. He also adds that the phone lines were down and there was no fuel nor cash. The Ethiopian government has denied that it has deliberately prevented aid from reaching the north. Thousands of people have rallied in Melbourne against new vaccination mandates. In Australia, where 83% of people between the ages of 16 and above have been fully given the jab against coronavirus nationwide, which is voluntary, but states and territories have mandated jabs for many occupations and barred the unvaccinated from activities such as dining out and concerts. According to reports, the Melbourne demonstration against the vaccination mandate that came into effect today, requiring construction workers in Victoria State to be fully inoculated, was peaceful. Australia has seen frequent, occasionally violent anti-vaccine rallies in recent months. Victoria, the second most populous state with a quarter of Australia's 25 million people, has an 87% vaccination rate and has endured 6 COVID-19 lockdowns, totally nearly 9 months. And the main news again. The military today repelled an attack by ISWAP on Askira-Uba local government area of Borno State, where an army officer, Brigadier General Zama Zikusu, and 3 soldiers were killed in the encounter described as the fiercest in the area. Also today, the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency arrested 12 dock workers at the Apapa seaport over the importation of 32.9 kilograms of cocaine worth over 9.5 billion naira. And at least 68 prisoners were killed today in fresh fightings that broke out at a prison in Ecuador. That's the news at 10 tonight. I'm Melinda Kinlami. On behalf of the team, good night.